Welcome to this deck of Obeka. She is a really cool commander that gives you multiple upkeeps equal to the amount of damage you deal to your opponent, so any double strike or +1 counters makes her that much better. This makes her a great commander for upgrading later, because any card with the word upkeep on it should catch your eye. You could focus more on giving her more power, or you could make a generic Grixis control deck, but we'll focus on the upkeep deck today because I love these kinds of commanders that sort of upgrade themselves. So what is in the deck? First of all, there's something interesting with the mana that you generate. For example, Rousing Refrain is a normally 5 mana sorcery that says add a red mana for each card in target opponent's hand. And believe me, in this deck you will want your opponents to have 7 cards in hand. Until end of turn you don't lose this mana. Then you exile Rousing Refrain with 3 time counters on it. And that means that it will be suspended, and that at the beginning of your upkeep you will remove a time counter, and when the last is removed you may cast the spell again, so then you will get even more mana. So if you have a way in which you can use the 7 mana to let Obeka attack again, you will go infinite. So that is one thing that is really cool about this mana base. Next up, there are multiple artifacts, mana rocks, that do something with your upkeep, like Replicating Ring. This is a snow artifact that says at the beginning of your upkeep, put a night counter on Replicating Ring, and then if you have 8 or more, seems like a lot but can be easily done, you remove the counters and create 8 of these mana rocks. And there is a win con in this deck that will help you win if you have those 8 mana rocks on the battlefield. They will of course give you a mana of any color as well. And Midnight Clock is a very famous one at this point, which says when the 12-hour counter is put on the Midnight Clock, you shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library and then draw 7 cards. You do lose the mana artifact, but again, it is pretty easy to get to 12 in this deck, definitely, as you get a counter each of upkeep anyways. Then we have redundancy, and this is something I really love. Paradox Haze is a 3 mana enchantment that says at the beginning of enchanted player's first upkeep each turn, so only the first, sadly, that player gets an additional upkeep step after their step. So that's already 1 every time. You can start using your deck on turn 3 with this. So I think this deck will love this enchantment. And then there's of course Spark Double, which works with every commander basically, but it could double your Obeka and therefore double the amount of creatures you have that can give you more upkeeps. Next up is giving your commander unblockable, because yes, it is pretty easy to get in with Obeka, but still you will want to force your opponents to take that damage. One card I really like with this is Headliner Scarlet. It's a 4 mana 3/3 that says when it enters the battlefield, creature target player controls can't block this turn. And you don't need to attack all of your opponents, you just need to attack 1. So if one of your opponents can't block, that's enough. At the beginning of your upkeep, we like this. Exile the top card of your library face down, and you may look at it and play it this turn. So it is also an upkeep card. So this is one that I really love, but basically you can play any type of unblockable, like Aether Tunnel, giving Obeka an extra power, which is helpful, giving you 1 extra upkeep, and then it can't be blocked. So we like that part the most here. I told you about the win con. It is Mechanized Production. It's a 4 mana enchantment that you use to enchant target artifact. We have a bunch in this deck, mostly mana rocks. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a copy token. And if you control 8 or more, with the same name as one another, you win the game. So this is a win con. That is, I would say, pretty easy to get, because at the beginning of each upkeep, you will already get a copy of any artifact. So this works basically on any artifact for you. As Foretold is a really good card as well. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, it gets a counter. And once each turn you pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with that mana value or less. where X is the number of time counters on Asphodult, of course. So you will be able to cast some pretty expensive cards that are in this deck while you are still playing a Grixis deck. So I'm not really saying that this is a great ramp deck, but there are some ways in this deck to cheat cards out really cheaply. And then basically every Court card, like Court of Embereth, is really good in this deck as well. I did see that some of the prices were spiking up for these cards because of Obeka, I think. But this one says, for example, you become the Monarch. That's one thing, doesn't work with your upkeep. But at the beginning of your upkeep you create a 3/1, which isn't very good yet. But then if you are the Monarch, the enchantment deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of creatures you control. So first 1, then 2, then 3, and it keeps going like that. Next up is a theme that is more around card advantage, but in this deck you will be able to make almost every card relevant for the upkeep. That is about card advantage at least. The 10th Doctor is a Doctor Who card, so if you don't like those, of course, you don't need to play it. But this one says, whenever you attack, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You put 3 times on it. If it doesn't have Suspend, it gains Suspend. Then it has an ability where for 7 mana, which you can get with Rousing Refrain, I think was the name, but the card that gives you the red mana, you time travel 3 times. Which means for each suspended card you own and each permanent you control with a time counter on it, you may add or remove a time counter. Then do it 2 more times. And that also works with the Rousing Refrain, which can then give you 7 more mana. So this already sort of keeps looping in that way. But you also get to further all of your other suspended cards, and there are a few in this deck as well. Next up is Plark and Tassanri, a 5 mana legendary creature. It says, at the beginning of your upkeep, each player exiles the cards from the top of your library until they exile a non-land card. An opponent chooses which one, which 2 you may cast from among the other cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. I think I need to explain it once again. Each player exiles a card from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. An opponent chooses a non-land card exiled this way, and you may cast up to 2 other spells that were exiled. So your opponent chooses one that you can't play, but you can play 2 of the other ones. So hopefully you have multiple opponents. Next up is Inspiring Refrain. Oh, what was the other then? Did I say? No, the other was Rousing Refrain. This is Inspiring Refrain, a 6 mana sorcery, but you can also suspend it for 3 mana, and then it will come in with the 3 counters first. Again, it is a suspend card, and when the suspension is over, or if you play the card for 6 mana, you draw 2 cards. So with the other combo, you can, well, draw your deck if you want. And you can stop at any time, I like that as well. Next up is a theme that strengthens Obeka, because that is really important. Of course, Blackblade Reforged is one that gives your creature, the equipped creature, +1 for each land you control. So we hope a lot. And then for 3 mana you can equip it on Legendary Creature, which is basically the only thing that we care about. Next up is Marchesa, the Black Rose. We have a bunch of cards that let you put +1 counters on Obeka. And Marchesa's most important thing here is that whenever a creature you control with a +1 counter on it dies, you return it to the battlefield at the beginning of your next end step. Not upkeep, but next end step, so she will return. She also has the throne, so whenever the creature, and she also gives all your other creatures the throne as well, so all of your creatures have to have it. It says whenever this creature attacks the player with the most or tied for the most life, put a +1 counter on it as well. So we can strengthen Obeka with this, or reanimate her, which we like. And one other protection piece is the Ring of Evo's Isle, and there is a whole, every color has one of these, but this one gives, at the beginning of your upkeep, a +1 counter on equipped creature, if it is blue, and Obeka is blue. And for 2 mana, if this is equipped, you can give the creature it is equipped to hexproof. So this is also a little bit of protection. There are multiple of these rings and most give protection. So this is one way to keep your commander alive and to grow Obeka as well. And that was it for the deck. There are a bunch more cards. I will put a link to the deck in the description. And if you want to see any other commanders from this set, or you want to see another build of Obeka, just tell me and I will show you how I would make it. Maybe in a video, maybe just in a new link to a new deck for you. But have a nice day in any case.